So hello and welcome to another one of our webinars. This one delivered in partnership with the Community Legal Association, the Community Legal Centres Association of Western Australia, and so practitioners in Western Australia can claim a CPD point under your slightly more onerous system than the rest of us. Can I begin the session by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands from which we're broadcasting today? I'm on the land of the Yagara people, and Gaynor, our presenter, is on the land of the Noongar people in Perth, but we've got people tuning in from across the country, and so we acknowledge that we all live and work on Aboriginal land and pay our respects to traditional custodians, traditional owners across the country. Really excited about this presentation. I was in Perth last year and visited Northern Suburbs Community Legal Service and was really impressed by this fantastic and innovative idea of a nurse working in a community legal centre as an advocate for older people. I'm really keen to know more and have the people doing that work share that experience with us. It seems to be an amazing model. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Gaynor, our presenter, in just a few minutes. A couple of housekeeping things. We are hoping to make a recording of this webinar available online soon-ish, technology willing. I've emailed around a copy of the PowerPoint presentation to everyone who'd registered as of about an hour ago. You should also be able to access that from the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel, rather than scribbling notes furiously as Gaynor's presenting. Couple of ways that you can ask questions, and we'd encourage you to ask questions as we go through this presentation. I think Gaynor's pretty keen to get feedback from people as we go, as she's describing the work, the fantastic work that they're doing. You can ask questions in a couple of ways. You can press that button that looks like a hand on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll see something that looks like a hand going up at our end. We'll be able to unmute your microphone and you'll be able to ask a question directly. The other way that you can ask a question is to type something into that questions box. I'll possibly butt in on Gaynor and read that question out or paraphrase that question, and it can be answered that way. So either press that button that looks like a hand or type a question into the questions box if you've got something to say as we go on. I think that's my housekeeping things. You're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to Gaynor speak about a registered nurse as a client advocate for older people and that fantastic program. And so I will hand over to Gaynor.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. As you can see, I'm a registered nurse and I work as a client advocate for older people. James, can you go to the next slide please? Okay, so in terms of working for a community legal centre, as you can see there, my knowledge and skills is very much in working in community, both in the UK and here in WA. So in terms of me actually applying for the position, the reason why the job appealed to me was because it was very similar to the community nursing roles that I'd undertaken in UK, and the part of the UK that I'm from is from the northwest, Liverpool, a place which is generally known more for its music and for football teams. So for me, coming to this area where there was concerns around elder abuse, it was about being a resource for older people who are experiencing difficulties and need somewhere to go, appealed to me quite a lot because of my previous knowledge, skills and experience. Very much in the acute sector where obviously you see people that come in who've experienced abuse. In the acute sector, which you're looking at your hospitals, it's very much more around maybe physical abuse and self-neglect. In the community it's a little bit different because you spend a lot of time working with individuals and with families, so you get to see you get a broader knowledge of how the community works, how people engage, how families work and the problems that they come up against, and what might present as one type of situation in an acute sector in terms of abuse might actually look completely different in a community environment. It may actually be carer burnout that's causing problems. So in order to have that broad knowledge and to know that there are many, many reasons for why our older people experience the things that they do. It's helpful if you've worked in a number of environments. James, can you go to the next slide, please? So in terms of a community legal centre, I work with a solicitor, and who assures me that it's very, very unusual for people in legal service that's not a community-based one to have a holistic approach towards clients, because they don't have the time and it's generally not part of the service that they provide. So in terms of the community legal centre and a holistic approach, as you can see there's two definitions of what holistic is. There's the philosophical definition and there's the medical definition. Okay. So you can see that both of them are very, very similar, but what it does do is it takes into account mental and social factors. It's the connection between the person, the environment, and how that will affect problems that they come across in life and how they deal with it. So from the Older People's Rights Service, that we do believe that legal difficulties older people are experiencing are intrinsic to their health and social circumstances, and that if we fail to consider that, the whole does leave the older person vulnerable and at risk of abuse. Can you go to the next slide, please, James? Thank you. So in terms of Older People's Rights Service and why people contact us, there are a variety of reasons, but generally it's because an older person has experienced some form of loss, and they may or may not refer to it as abuse. I do come across, or we do come across, a lot of older people who are very, very reluctant to refer to their experiences as abuse. It's difficult for them to talk about it in those terms because often it is about a family member, and they almost, when they talk about it, they will describe how uncomfortable it makes them feel and how it's very much it's almost a disservice to they're always thinking about the other person as to how they don't want to get them into trouble, even though what's happening is impacting quite greatly on them. So it could be that money's missing, or there's financial problems. They find out the son, the daughter, the niece, the nephew, they've put them in this place of trust. They've given them sort of uncontrolled use of finances, expecting them to do what was requested of them. They don't necessarily monitor it. And they then get to a stage where they don't actually want to address it, because addressing it may potentially put them in a place of conflict, and they're not feeling strong enough to deal with that. And that can be for a variety of reasons. It can be because of fear of relationship breaking down. It could be that because there'll be a loss of emotional support. It could be that the person that's actually dealing with the finances is also their carer. And that isolation that might come if they challenge that person, and who would believe them. And one of the things that we do come across quite often, or certainly when people first contact the service and they ring up, is that somebody's accused the older person of having memory loss problems, and you'll hear things like, my son said he has a friend who works in aged care and he's going to come and look at you because I know that you've got memory problems, and they're going to confirm it. Or you don't understand, you don't know, what do you know, you're always forgetting, well, you're old now. That's because you're not listening, because you didn't hear anything. So it's this constant putting down of the older person and attributing it to physical problems, which are sometimes age-related, degeneration, or it could be that there's been a chronic illness for a long time. But this erosion of a person's confidence has a huge impact on how they, on their health, general health, physical health, overall well-being, and it puts, at that stage of doubting themselves, people then start to lose trust in a lot of people, because the carer is the person they went to, the carer is the person that they spoke to, and that person now is no longer providing that support and telling them that they've lost capacity. So I do get a lot of calls about that, and that's one of the things that it takes a while for someone to say. And I do ask them that question as well, is, has anyone mentioned anything around your memory? Has anyone questioned it? Has anyone said anything about it? And it's pretty often, it's not anyone in the health or medical profession who's mentioned it, it's been a family member. And they kind of attribute every forgetful episode to a loss of capacity, which, as we all know, when you're busy, you're bereaved, you're unwell, your concentration's not necessarily the same, and we all have periods of forgetfulness. It's just that as you get older, that link is always made to being, it's because of capacity. Bereavement is another issue for people contacting Elder People's Rights Service. People often make decisions when they're bereaved, almost like a knee-jerk reaction. So we do have some clients who will have maybe commenced an enduring power of attorney or done other things, guardianship, because they're quite fearful of their own health, their own mortality, about what's going to happen. They're obviously very recently involved in dealing with their loved one's death, all the complications that may have arisen for them in dealing with the relative and all the things that need to take place, so that when they start to think about themselves and the family member, their children, who may be the person who are going to have to deal with this, they don't want to leave them with a burden, and will go ahead, go and see a solicitor, or just from the internet do their enduring power of attorney or guardianship, complete documentation, and not think about the consequences. Which links in as well for that fear as well, the feeling of being mistreated or being disregarded. We hear that quite a lot as well. It's when that person talks about being invisible or that they've already died, because people stop involving the elder person in their own decision making. They make decisions over them, that they don't acknowledge the fact that the elder person has a voice and is able to make decisions. Sometimes we will get clients that will contact us because they've been to an education session and they want to discuss some of the matters that were brought up during the education session. Sometimes it's a proactive, I want to talk through a situation before I go ahead and I do something. Sometimes it's a concern because they've completed documentation, which when they've thought about it and when they've been given information, that they've realised it wasn't actually their decision, that they were encouraged to do it, and it may well have been through family or friends. It may also have been during a period of when they've been acutely unwell. They may have been in hospital and it's been encouraged by professionals at that time for the person to complete the documentation, and further down the line the person's realised this is not what I want, and I wanted someone to help me and to support me, and what I have is somebody who's taken over, somebody who's not listening, somebody who's not doing what I've asked, and I feel insignificant and that I don't really matter anymore. Another issue that we have, which is increasing, is a return of adult children to the home and the problems they bring. This is often many and varied, and there is usually a whole history behind the problems that the older person and the adult child have. We find that we certainly seems to be an increase in children returning home who have addiction problems. Could be drugs, could be alcohol, could be gambling, and they almost revert to a teenage state in the home. They monopolise the main rooms. They don't contribute to the house at all. They expect the elder person, who is often on an aged care pension, to contribute to the home. and to do everything and to clean up after them and to pay for things, and is seen often as an endless source of cash. And when the person isn't actually giving them the cash, they'll then maybe ask for the bank card, or then they may say, well, why don't I help you do your banking online? You don't need to go and do it. I can do these things for you. So these are many, many of the reasons that we have for people coming to us. Sometimes it can be that the adult child has mental health problems, which can be very, very difficult for older people to deal with, because there can be very erratic changes in behaviour, and it may well be medication related, it could be drug related, but the older person often feels this sense of duty, and we hear a lot about the person who they were the child that may have been unwell through childhood, they may have been the child that struggled at school, the other children all have done really, really well for themselves. You know, I've always felt a bit more responsible, a bit more sorry for this particular child. So then to come to a service and say, actually this child is now abusing me, is a huge step for people to take. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so in terms of social work as a role and community nursing, the Venn diagram there shows many, many of the similar things. In nursing, we probably use terminology a little bit differently, but it often means the same thing that a social worker may well be doing, especially if you're working in community nursing. So your social inclusion and justice and access to services, they kind of mirror, they're very similar, but it's a different end of the spectrum that we work. Counselling would be more about listening and assessing when it comes to nursing terminology. Society and environment, family relations, health implications, again, they are all things that would be taken into account by both a social worker and a community nurse. Advocacy, empowerment, promotion of independence, again, within both professions, they're things that are promoted for that individual to do as much as they can. I suppose the difference with nursing would be very much more that for our older people who have health problems, it's the impact that those health problems can have on how that individual presents, how they communicate, how well they take in information in, how long it might take them to express themselves or to show some understanding or to process information before questioning again. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, in terms of nursing, this is from an article that I've read, and it pretty much defines how, as nurses, advocacy has always been a role of nursing. It's just that it's seen in a different context, because nurses are obviously, the stereotypical image of nurses is that you are dressing a wound, you're going to put a plaster on something, you're going to give someone medication and you're going to make them better. And that is part of nursing, and that is part of the physical or the clinical side of nursing, but nursing is very, very much broader than that and encompasses a lot more, because it is about dealing with people who don't fit into nice, neat little boxes and come packaged with one particular problem that you deal with. As a nurse, if you're going into someone's home, the first thing that you have to take into account is that you're going into their environment and you are a guest in their home, and you listen to what that person says, and whilst you may be doing a physical task in terms of dressing a wound, you're also chatting about their general lifestyle, their activities of daily living, and within that you will do many, many jobs in one role. So you'll be wanting to know, have they had anything to eat and drink? Who does the shopping for them? Is anyone coming to visit? Who comes to visit? Are there any problems with the people that come and visit you? Do you have carers come in? What's your relationship like with your carers? Do they turn up when they're supposed to? Do they do the job that they're supposed to? Are you getting your medication? Are you having any problems with your medication? And you would do that all in a very much a conversational style. So you would be encouraging that individual to give you lots of information without it being an obvious assessment and questioning of them. So as a nurse, that advocacy role has always been there, and you ascertain through the information that's given whether there are any concerns about the individual, as in risks to their overall safety. Are they being taken advantage of? Is there anyone else that needs to be involved in this process? And it's very much a collaborative process, and making sure that the appropriate professionals are involved to try and support this individual. So as you can see there, I've put in information from, it's the UK Nursing and Midwifery Council, where it's a professional standard as part of the Code of Conduct that nurses act as advocates for patients. So it's those transferable skills that can be moved into other areas. Can you go to the next one, please, James? Again, this is just a little bit more information about how a nurse fits into advocacy. So it is about safeguarding patients' autonomy and promoting self-determination. And if patients are competent and willing to make decisions related to the healthcare, this is very much around the health bit, but it also transfers across, as in that if there are concerns about someone's capacity, it's about making sure that information is presented to them in terms that that individual can understand, because we don't always know whether there may be some learning difficulties. We don't always know what that level of person's education has been, and whether any difficulties in understanding any information is because of clinical issues. It could be because of medication. It could literally just be down to sleep deprivation. It could be that they're the carer for somebody else and they're just exhausted from the role and they're just not taking things in. So again, looking at the advocacy role, very much as a nurse, you work between patients, families, significant others, health and social care providers. You try to gather all the information to get the story, to then see where does everybody fit into this pattern and who can help and who can support. And it would all only be on a need-to-know basis. And part of that as well is challenging certain things and recognising that, you know, family can't do everything, nor can care providers do everything, and nor can health and social care, whether it be the nurse or the social worker. They're not a panacea for everything, that there are limitations to what services can be provided, but also identifying if there are gaps in service as well that need to be addressed, and obviously raising that through individual services, organisations, management structures. Can we go to the next slide, please? So for Western Australia, as you can see there, we have over 458,000 seniors, which in a population of 2.6 million is almost a fifth of the population. Of the older people in the WA region, most of them will live in the southwest and Perth metropolitan area. As a service provided to older people who are at risk of or who are experiencing elder abuse, it's a team of 2 people, which is myself and a solicitor. So if we look at the population, there's not many older people who get to 80 plus without any health or social issues. Our clients that we see generally range in age. The majority of them are somewhere between 70 and 90 years of age, and from a variety of different backgrounds. So if we take into account that 10 to 15% of adults over 65 experience depression, and around 10% have anxiety problems, which can raise to up to 35% if in a care environment, then that's a lot of adults that we have to treat quite carefully, listen to them very carefully, and make sure that things go at their pace, because we don't want to make their experiences any more difficult than they need to be. And those people are also in many, many different roles. They may have the carer responsibilities, they may recently be bereaved, they may be on different medications, they may be supporting their adult children, it could be that they're also guardians for grandchildren. They may also still be caring for their elderly frail parents and supporting them in ways that they can do. So there's a lot of pressure on that age group of almost 50 to 90, depending on where you are within your life challenges. And you know, Fran and I did almost a little kind of from age 20 to age 90, what are the things that you tend to deal with in life? And when we broke it down and we looked at all the different things that you have to deal with in life, we realised that as you get to the almost 50, 60 plus, there is a lot more complicated information that you need to deal with, and form filling and involvement with health and social care professionals and organisations, and filling the same information in 50 different forms, constantly being questioned, asked about certain things. They may be dealing with bereavement, their own Centrelink issues, retirement, being out the workforce. So there's lots and lots of complications that come towards the end or your more senior years that make life that little bit more difficult for you. And one of the things as well that we hear a lot of is the increasing use of technology, which is fantastic for those people who are on board and can use it or want to be upskilled. But it's a real barrier to people who have hearing problems, visual problems. They don't have their manual dexterity anymore because of specific conditions, and they're becoming increasingly distant from society, because many things are, well, can you do it online? Can you fill it in? Can you log in? Can you do this? Now, I don't know about anyone else, but I often forget my login details for things, and you know, I'll do my reminder and I'll get sent it and I'll do it again, and that's fine. But also, even down to doing passwords. Passwords have become more complicated. Many sites that you go into or where you need to use a password, they want you to put in different numbers, exclamation marks, capitals, which makes it more difficult for people to try and remember a password and to use it. So there are a lot of challenges there for people as they get older, which makes life a little bit more difficult, and also probably highlights the gap between you and people who can navigate systems and are quite savvy with computers. Can I have the next slide, please? So for people who are recipients of health and social care, many of those are older people, and you'll find that they also may have complex care needs. So they will be seeing different services, OT, physio, speech pathologist. There might be a psychologist in there, psychiatrist, care providers. You have chronic pain teams, Centrelink, mental health. So when you start to look at all of these issues that the person is dealing with, and that's for them, they may have a spouse who also has their own set of providers involved in relation to complex care. So there's a lot of appointments to go to, there's a lot of care needs being dealt with. And obviously anything that, if you then have on top of that an older couple who are maybe being financially abused by their children, there's a lot of things to work through before you even look at the legal side of things. because often those health conditions and the impact they have on an individual impact on how they may respond in that office environment. It may even be a challenge for them just to get to the office because they have no capacity issues, but they are physically dependent on other people for transport, for being moved around in a wheelchair. They may not have an electric wheelchair, so they are reliant on other people to be the person that gets them from A to B. And they may also want to keep their appointment private. And when you're a recipient of care or you need the support of other people, you've had to disclose certain amounts. A lot of older people worry about people talking and knowing about the business. And whilst that is not the best way sometimes for them to safeguard themselves, you understand that it's a way that they've always lived their life, and they keep their problems to themselves and they deal with things that almost very stoic way of dealing with life. But also consequences of that can be isolation and increase the vulnerability to financial abuse or social abuse, psychological abuse. So for the clients that we come in, certainly as a nurse advocate, one of the things that I would do is I do spend a lot of time just observing the person to see how they are. If it's on a phone, obviously it's a little bit more difficult, but you listen to things on the phone, so it would be the tone, the breathing. If someone's got a breathing problem, again, you would pick that up on a phone. If they've got anxiety, if they're tearful. So it's trying to listen to not just the story, but how is that person presenting visibly or audibly. So for example, a client with Parkinson's may present with tremors. There could be facial masking, so you wouldn't necessarily get an indicator from facial expression as to what's going on. They'll appear to be quite blank and emotionless. There could be mobility issues. There'll often be a delay in processing information and responding to questions because that whole moving is slower. It takes time. You can't rush. Speech can be impaired, not very clear, and there can be the need to ask them to repeat or to maybe just let them continue talking so that you can get the gist of what they're saying, because it can be very difficult to stop the person in the middle of the information that they're relaying and asking them to go back, because again that process is so slow. There can also be problems with excessive saliva because of swallow problems associated with that particular condition. Again, other conditions would give you a different set of issues or problems that need to be looked out for to see whether it actually makes a difference as to what they understand, what information they've processed, and did they retain that information as well. So a first appointment won't necessarily give you all that information. Sometimes there needs to be more than one interaction. And appointments for our client group often will take a couple of hours. That's not unusual to give that person time to tell their story, and because a lot of emotion is involved as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of client interaction, generally the telephone conversations I have will take anywhere from 15 to 30 plus minutes just to get an understanding of the older person's issue. They often start with, I'm not sure where to start. So again, it's getting that person to the place where they actually feel comfortable in telling you what is often very personal business, which is very upsetting to them. It may have taken them a long time to actually get up the courage to contact someone and to tell them about their suspicions. One of the things that is very important is to try and develop that rapport with an older person, and interjecting and rushing them and pretty much getting to the point of the story normally puts them off, and they need to tell you the story in their time, in the timeline that they can put together, because their links are often related to maybe appointments on diaries. If you're not in a work environment and you don't have to be anywhere on any given day or time, often days will seem the same. So if I look at it from a personal point of view, if I'm on leave from work and I don't need to be anywhere or do anything, I will not be aware of time or day because I don't need to. It's not important. I'm enjoying the fact that I've got that relief from having to be on a schedule. So for a lot of older people, diaries and calendars are very, very important for them. So their concept of time is not always the same, and they're not able to as quickly identify when a particular incident happened and on what date. So it's being mindful of that as well, and getting them to link the story to, can you remember where you were at the time? Who was there? Was there anything that happened that day that you might remember or recall? Was it anyone's birthday around that time? Was there an event? Did you go out somewhere? So all those little connecting bits of the social life help them to identify dates and times a little bit more clearly. There, as well, part of that is we have a lot of older people who can be quite tearful on the phone, obviously quite shocked about the situation. They can be intimidated by the fact that they've discussed it, and whether they'll be judged as being silly or stupid. I mean, they're terms that we often hear from older people, that they'll attached to themselves. I'm just a silly old woman, I shouldn't have done this, I know that now. So it's, as well, it's trying to get them to understand that, it's not about silliness, it's just that you made a judgment at the time. There are reasons around it that can be often quite complicated, but let's start moving forward. Memory loss is an embarrassment about trusting family, friends. Again, that's one that comes up, and as I've already said about the haziness with recalling dates. I mean, sometimes that is related to what's actually happened to the person. Sometimes it is genuinely about capacity issues, that they may have the beginnings of some form of cognitive impairment, and there can be repeated phone calls, non-recognition of having called the service before, may relate to they recognise a voice or a name but have absolutely no recollection maybe of visiting, having an appointment. It may have been 6 months before when they've been to the service, and there's been quite a dramatic change in that person. But all they've done is, they've been tidying through things and they've found a business card and they've thought, I'll ring that person. So there's a lot of sometimes ringing around and finding out what's going on for those individuals, because they're often quite distressed when they ring, because they know that they're experiencing memory loss and they don't know why, and they're quite frightened and quite suspicious of everyone. So that can be quite difficult to deal with. Next slide, please. So for health, how does it impact on people who present with older people's rights? Acute illness and infection can affect decision making. If you have an older person who's quite susceptible to urinary infections, chest infections, they can present as extremely confused for that period of time. It's not unusual for family members to take advantage of people during that time, and we have had clients who've been encouraged to go and make enduring power of attorneys during this time, and money's been taken from them, and within a short period of days they've required treatment or hospital admission. Painkillers, very strong painkillers, pain patches, opiates, chronic conditions, they all affect the time needed to process information. Physical problems affect an older person's ability to complete the documentation. As we've said, it's visual, it's hearing, can they even write? In terms of a nurse advocate, and the same for any advocate really, is that the older person wants to be validated and the recognition that someone understands their condition. I suppose from a nurse advocate's point of view is you're used to dealing with older people who are elderly, frail, have health conditions. You know how conditions can progress, you know how it can affect and impact the individual, and you can often see changes in the condition before the older person can. Not everyone has very good insight into their condition and how it affects them. And sometimes the legal issue can be the less important of the issue for the older person, but it is to somebody else. So, you know, who's driving the older person seeking the legal advice? Is it a relative who is looking to gain somewhere? Next slide, please. So for an older person, how do you navigate the world? I mean, this is just a lot of the things that we tend to come across. It's about future planning, a lot of it. Who's going to advocate? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Who will sort out my bills? Now, for me, personally, I wouldn't question that. Mine would all be direct debit. But if it's not something that you're used to and your expectation, because that's all you've ever done, is that somebody goes to the post office and pays it, and it's done in cash. Doing things through direct debit can be very alien to some people, and there is a lack of trust about, well, why would someone need this information? Why would I put it in? I don't want someone to have that amount of access. Lack of social support because they've lost friends who may have passed away, houses are too big, children have moved out of the area, loss of independence, no longer able to drive anymore, not having someone to listen to them. So there's a lot of challenges that you face as an older person before you even think about the legal implications of what you may or may not have done. There's that underlying worry and a bit of mistrust and sometimes lack of confidence. So next slide, please. So in terms of keeping the focus, as I've already sort of mentioned earlier on, is that one of the biggest things is interrupting an older person when they're relaying information to can often put them in a bit of a state of flux, and they get quite flustered and need to go back. For some people it's fine, it's not an issue, but for those who do have health problems and are on medication and have lots, maybe a few different conditions, there tends to be a little bit of a pattern whereby if they're interrupted, it does tend to cause them a lot of discomfort in relaying the story, and they almost need to start at the beginning again. Within that, when you've had those interactions with that person, if you start to see patterns, then it's about whether potentially there is a need for medical or mental health information, or maybe their medications need to be reviewed by the pharmacist. Are they under-medicated, over-medicated? There's obviously a big need as well to just support people through the difficult times that they have, making sure that they can get access to crisis services, problems with family members. Mental health is a big issue because it's very distressing for older people, because often the family member needs to spiral to a certain degree before the services can actually intervene and assist them. An example is clients that we had where there was a huge issue and the adult child kept returning to the home, putting them under a lot of stress, and they had a lot of health problems. It did result in hospital admissions for this older couple, and it was just the emotional and psychological stress and turmoil they were put through by this child with mental health problems who kept returning and causing a lot of problems for them. So there was a lot of support required for that couple, and a lot of encouragement in making sure that services were all aware of the pressures that they were put under and the ill health that their adult child seemed to be experiencing. There's also the fact that for older people as well, there is a bit of a taboo about anxiety and depression, and it's just encouraging them to know that it's a normal, it is part of life, and many people do experience some form of depression or anxiety, and for many, many reasons. And encouraging them to talk about it and explaining that, we all need to talk, we all need to discuss our problems. And if you're isolated, it can be difficult. And having that knowledge of community services does help. Again, the isolation, if you're visually impaired, your mobility is reduced, if your hearing is an issue for you, if you can't access computers, even down to using a touch-tone phone with multiple options. If you've got a hearing and a visual problem and you get on the phone and you just want to talk to someone, and it's press 1, press 2, press 3, wait for an operator. Again, that's a lot of frustrations, and it can also be physically uncomfortable for an elder person. An example I would give you is if I'm ringing Centrelink on behalf of someone, I can put my phone on speakerphone, I can continue to do other work. An elder person, to sit in the same position for 20 minutes while you're waiting for someone to contact you can be extremely uncomfortable, and they will often just give up and wait for that letter to give them a reduction in the pension or whatever for them then to question. Next slide, please. They're just a few case studies, just briefly explained. So again, in terms of being a nurse, sort of an advantage would be having that knowledge of care facilities, care providers, how they work, challenging people who are care managers, coordinators as to how they're delivering the care and in what way, and knowing that they can actually be a little bit more creative about how they deliver services. And having been someone who did deliver, who has assessed, I do know that there's other ways that things can be done. And if you don't have that working knowledge of it, it's difficult for that to be challenged. You just know that you want something to change, but you don't quite know how. Again, encouraging relatives who are carers, to know that it's okay to say I can't do this anymore, and for them to understand that whilst they may have a desire to care for their relative in an environment, and they may even be the guardian for this person, that they need to recognise the limitations and the impacts on their own health, and that with the best will in the world, you cannot be a team. You cannot provide 24-hour support to one person, especially if you have a disrupted sleep cycle as well. The other side as well is the self-neglect, unrealistic expectations, lack of insight into own care needs. We've come across clients who believe that their relative is actually, that they're being abused, and what you actually find out is from that conversation is that their adult child may even be terminally unwell, but the expectation from the older person is that their child meets their every need. And they're just, that breakdown in communication or not listening for a variety of reasons has made the home situation difficult, and they've got to the stage where the care requirements in their own environment can be beyond what is needed to be provided. Also as well, there's certain risks and certain conditions around delirium as well, which means that you may function quite well at certain times, but at other stages you will, your capacity to understand your environment and to deal with things would be significantly impaired because of your illness. So, next slide. So challenges for older people, very much about not wanting to be fobbed off, dismissed for age-related reasons, and because they're not always very clear on facts, that they just need a little bit of time. Decisions are often historical, and the decision they made at the time, which may have been 2, 3, 4 years ago, they were in a better place when they made that decision, and now it doesn't quite work for them and they're not sure what to do and can be embarrassed. As a nurse working in a legal service, I am confined by the restrictions in place for legal practice rules and codes. As an individual, I do find it quite frustrating at times. I'm very much used to a collaborative approach, and about having information from everyone involved. So for me, it is a challenge that I do probably moan about quite regularly to Fran about, but you know, she's quite tolerant of me, so we're working on that one. And last slide, please. So just in conclusion, so our client group does range from 50 to 90 plus years. And it's often likely that health will be a contributing factor to safeguarding the well-being of older people. And that it's the knowledge, skills and experience of the advocate that benefit the client. It's not necessarily whether they're a social worker or a nurse, because you can be a social worker and have worked in the health with older people for many, many years and have an excellent understanding of the impact of health on people and how it works. The same with nursing, you know, you need to have worked with your client group, you need to have worked in your variety of environments. There are a lot of transferable skills from both professions. So our clients, they do generally lie somewhere between health and social care. With regards to that spectrum, depending on where they are, they can be closer to social care than health, and also the other way around. And as advocates, as nurses, we do know that dependence and lack of confidence does increase with health problems. It leaves older people quite vulnerable, they don't trust their own judgment, and they are more at risk of abuse. So from the Older People's Rights Service, you know, we hope that when people do contact us, that the whole point of being a nurse is to be able to assess whether there's any decline there and the risks associated, to try and reduce that social isolation and to build up trust, and that advocating with other services, that knowledge of the health and social care environment, the service provision, to know that things can be done differently and certain things can be challenged, is to try and give the older person a better experience and to feel empowered about the decisions they make. And that's very much it, and I hope you could understand my accent.
Gaynor, thanks so much. That was fantastic. A reminder to our participants that there are a couple of ways that you can ask questions, because we do have a few minutes left for questions. You can ask them by typing them into the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. You can press that button that looks like a hand. I might get started, and rather than a question for you, Gaynor, I understand Fran's there with you, who's the solicitor in the team. Fran, I wonder if you could just reflect on the value of having a nurse advocate as part of the team from your perspective as a lawyer working in a community legal centre.
Certainly. You've heard that there's a huge overlap between the work that a nurse advocate would do in a community legal centre compared to a social worker. But I chose the nurse end of that for three distinct reasons, and it wasn't that I set out to choose or to select and advertise for a nurse advocate, because I didn't even know that they existed. Community nursing to me was a silver chain, and that was it. What I noticed in Gaynor's resume was that she answered three really important questions for me, and that was that she was able to understand the physical and cognitive effects of various drugs and various diseases, and that the social worker I had before would have had a similar understanding that in that area that I had. So it added nothing more to the service. The other important thing was that particularly with psychiatry reports, but all sorts of medical reports, I found that reading medical notes, and in particular medical reports, they have their own language, and it was stressful and time consuming for me to go through it, and instead of simply reading it as I would read any other document and understand it. Gaynor has stepped in and she's able to tell me what I don't understand. The social worker that I had before God love her, she wouldn't have been able to have that level. Now, I'm not saying that another social worker, as you heard with Gaynor saying, if she's trained from a hospital background, she's going to understand that. I didn't have that. So I come from a very practical sense. What can you add to this service that I can't do? And that was another thing that Gaynor could add. And the third one was that she had a really good working knowledge of the health systems and the ins and outs of it, and in particular the care, the residential care system. So I thought, well, if you can show me that on your resume, I want you to show me it in a practical sense. And she has, and I do pat her on the back quite publicly, because she has increased the level of client contact. At first I didn't quite understand why this level of contact was, or the reason for the increase. But I realized that the reason there are more telephone calls and even face-to-face calls is because it's connected with the health of the client and the right time to get me to intervene in the legal side. So I'm often left to the side until all of that is worked out, and then I'm brought in.
Terrific, thanks. I think that's a really, really instructive for those of us working in community legal centres about the value of Gaynor's role. Gaynor, can I ask, given your health background and training and all those kinds of things, how much of your work, how much of your advocacy do you reckon is directed towards healthcare and health-related issues for your older clients, and how much is kind of other advocacy with some of those other services that you spoke about before?
I'd say probably about 70%, because many of the clients that do call through, there is an underlying health issue that's there, and whilst it may not, from their perspective, they might see it as having that great an impact. It's only when you talk through things and you get a little bit more information that they actually realise it is affecting more of their life than they realised. And it's just trying to link them in and encouraging them to go back, to get reviews, to question things, because people in power, and I mean that in terms of health professionals, often when you're told to do something by a health professional and you're an elder person, you just do it because you're being told to. And it may well have been valid 5-6 years ago, but they still carry that information forward, and it's not relevant for them at the time. They may have seen one particular professional and didn't engage very well with them, didn't like what they'd said, didn't think it was appropriate, or felt the doctor didn't listen, or they never chased up again. And they need to be encouraged to go back to say, this is still an issue and a problem for this individual. And it's just giving them that confidence to say that, you know, what you're saying is right. You have got an issue and it does need to be addressed.
And Gaynor, you raised the issue of kind of out-of-date knowledge in other health practitioners. Can I just ask, as a practical point, working in a community legal centre now, how are you keeping your skills up and your kind of professional obligations as a registered nurse?
Well, I also have CPD points that I have to do. So I have to do 20 hours of CPD. Now, within nursing, not all nursing is that clinical role. A lot of it is non-clinical, but you need your knowledge, skills and experience to be able to do that role. So if you think about nurses in terms of those that are in management, would often have very, very limited client contact, but they're managing other staff. So those that are in the non-clinical side, you are still a registered nurse. It's just that your role has taken a different aspect, a bit like maybe kind of like a mental health nurse, in the sense that they're often just talking and doing for people to help them with their emotional or psychological, mental health well-being, referral systems and services. It's not all about here's a plaster to make it better, here's a pill to make it better. It's so much broader when it comes to health. It's the well-being of the individual has a huge impact on how people, on what people's health is like and how they deal with their health problems.
Terrific. Maybe for my last question, I might just ask you, talked about one of the challenges being in previous roles that you've had kind of a group information sharing and kind of shared case management kind of approach would be my language, and you having some frustration about that not being the way that lawyers work. I wonder if there are other aspects of the way that you've seen legal services delivered that cause some tension or are different to how you'd done your advocacy work as a nurse advocate in other organisations or in previous roles?
I think it's very much the restriction on information. The role that I've had previously, it's very much about finding out what is the issue from the elder person, who's it with, how best do they want me to address it, making phone calls on their behalf, gathering all the information. I think the difference is that in working in a legal service, there's limitations with regards to who I'm contacting and how much information. A lot of collaborative work is very much about what do you know, what information can you give me, and it's very much a team around a person approach. So you draw in the services that are required and you have that open conversation and dialogue to be able to work in the best interest of that person, and always with engaging with that person, and you would always ask permission of that person, because they have they can decline services or support at any stage. But it's that much more open approach, and also that face-to-face, not just virtual working together as well. It's actually having the face-to-face meeting. So you might be working with the social worker, with the care provider, with the person, with the family, and having that meeting together to discuss things to improve whatever experience the older person's having. So it's a lot of that groundwork that maybe would be done as a preventative before that person experiences potentially some form of abuse, because your support networks are in there. You're addressing the issue that maybe carer burnout is quite possible, and you're promoting that person to manage their own finances, their own things beforehand. So for me, it's a different approach that's used certainly in the UK, because the system just works differently. We have a lot more community services working together, so it just has a different approach. So for me, I kind of I struggle a little bit, because I can't take that knowledge out of my head and that way of working. So I do have to constantly remind myself that it is a bit different. The social side of things, certainly services in terms of engagement and reduced isolation are much better here in Australia than they are in the UK, and that it's not lip service, that there is a true desire to get people engaged in the community, and that funding's not in place in the UK, so it's so refreshing to see that here. But there are gaps in other areas which just make things a little bit more difficult.
What I would add to that,
sorry, go on.
Sorry. What I would add to that is that in a legal environment, there is always that issue of privileged information, and unless the client has said okay, and even when the client says okay, privileged information will affect, if it's let out, will affect their legal outcome anyway. So whichever way you look at it, there will always be excuse me, a restriction or some sort of limitation on the freedoms of the advocate. It has to almost remain within the four walls. Outside the actual issue of the legal issue of the client, then of course Gaynor has got far more freedom to make those decisions. But if they touch the legal matter, yes, unfortunately she has me to contend with.
And that's why it's very important that Fran and I do have a very good relationship, and that we can work things through and discuss it, and kind of we hold our own multidisciplinary team meetings to go through, so to make sure that that I'm able to do my job, but I actually don't cause any complications there in trying to do it the way that I know. So we do, you know, we do work things through quite well together.
Nevertheless, I understand her frustration, and I would be one to put my hand up immediately to say that we do need much more collaborative work within the community. And I'll give you an example of it happening already. And of course, the growth of health justice centres is a break in the traditional way of looking at solving legal issues. I said that I'd give you an example. We work quite close with other CLCs because, of course, their clients might well be elderly, and in particular the Consumer Credit Law Service will have older people who get involved in contracts that are not to their advantage. And one of the solicitors has actually asked for some assistance from Gaynor to help her work through the problems of this particular lady, because as a solicitor she doesn't understand the health implications of this elderly person. So you can see that we're already almost moving away from the four strong walls and hoping to get a more, what can I say, collaborative approach to aim at the best outcome for the client.
Terrific. It sounds like Gaynor's a fantastic resource for your centre, Fran, and across the sector. And I think it's a fantastic model. And I think as we're talking more and more about health justice partnerships, learning more from health professionals like Gaynor and others is increasingly important in our work. Can I thank both of you for speaking with us today, for sharing your lessons on the role of a nurse advocate in a CLC, which is, I said to open, is a really impressive model, and the insights that you've shared today have really given us a lot to think about, ways that we might be able to work more collaboratively or in innovative ways with health professionals. Thank you both for the work that you're doing and for sharing it with us today. Can I also thank everyone who tuned in to hear about this work? We'll try and make a recording available and share it with you in the next little while. Otherwise, we look forward to speaking to you soon. Have a great afternoon. Have a great Easter. Goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.